Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name.
Former FBI agent Kyle Seraphin, who recently received a letter from the FBI saying, be quiet about this. Kyle, welcome to the show. You're not following orders.
So, Kyle, you had some issues that brought you here as a whistleblower. Joining me now to discuss is FBI whistleblower Kyle Seraphin. Kyle, thanks for spending some time with us again. Joining me now is FBI whistleblower Kyle Seraphin. Joining me now is a frequent guest of the show, former FBI special agent, whistleblower as well, Kyle Seraphin.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Right, we're lucky to have him with us today. He's Kyle Seraphin, a real whistleblower himself.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public, and we're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Why did you decide to become a whistleblower?
I just made a decision that this is America's information, it's not mine, and I'm not going to let the FBI steamroll me and my family.
Kyle Seraphin, he's a former FBI agent. He's the host of the Kyle Seraphin podcast, and he joins us on the phone. Hello, Kyle. Great to have you back with us, sir.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Kyle Seraphin.
Let's turn it over to two former FBI special agents turned whistleblowers who are holding the Bureau accountable, Steve Friend and Kyle Seraphin.
A brave FBI whistleblower who is a friend of our show, also Dan Bongino's. Kyle Seraphin, he's the host of something that strangely is called The Kyle Seraphin Show. Follow him on Twitter. I'm Sebastian Gorka. I'll call you later. We'll talk guns, we'll talk optics.
All right, any update on your whistleblower situation?
No, I expect to be attacked for the foreseeable future.
Okay, at least you're realistic. Thanks so much, Kyle.
All right, Kyle Seraphin, former FBI agent, also host of the Kyle Seraphin podcast. Thanks as always, Kyle. Good to talk to you today, sir.
Perfect, man. God bless you, brother. Thank you for standing up for the truth, man. Thank you for coming on.
Steve, Kyle, you guys are great Americans, and it's an honor to have you on the program. Have a great weekend.
And follow him, Kyle Seraphin, with a PH on Twitter. God bless you, Kyle. This is
Well, so Kyle, thank you so much for joining us. Great chatting with you.
Kyle Seraphin, thank you.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Friday, August the 25th. It is now just a little bit after 8:30 in Texas, America. I'm going to do a little something here because we are having an interesting gremlin. The last time that I spoke with you guys, you mentioned that the audio level was too low. And I'm going to fix that right now. Oh, interestingly enough, we have a device that we run. It's called Loopback. It allows me to run multiple audio sources in to our stream. And for some reason, I set it at 100% audio, and then I watch it, and it just adjusts downward, 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 and downward. And I have no idea why. But all of you in the chat that are constantly saying hello to the rat bastards at the FBI, I don't know if it's related, but I have not found a single setting that would allow it to constantly adjust audio downward. It is a strange, strange thing to deal with. Steve Friend and I have been trying to sort of shortcut this problem all morning since we got started. So I've got it loud and clear right now because we're going direct. We are not using the software, but man, Something pretty strange going on there. We will we'll spend the weekend working on this. So a lot of you were asking about baby updates. Water break. We are pending the drop zone. We are over the DZ, and I imagine that there will be a new Seraphin baby pretty soon. Thanks for all of you joining us in the chat. We do really appreciate it. I want to say thanks to our sponsors. I think we're going to have an interesting conversation today with Steve Friend, a little weekly wrap up. It's been a ridiculously and historic week again. In fact, to the point where we have historic fatigue, I would say. And I got a surprise guest for you guys in just a minute as well. So let me say thanks to sponsors really quickly. Let's start with Patriot Coolers. Here they are. These are my friends over at Patriot Coolers. You go to patriotcoolers.com. Use promo code Kyle, Kyle. That'll get you 10% off. There's other ways to do it, but that one lets them know that we sent you. You can also check out their hard coolers, their tumblers, their merch. They've got a soft pack, which is really, really helpful if you've got kids and you want to move around, take some cool snacks, especially as you guys were talking about in the chat. 108 degrees around the country, 105 degrees here in Texas on the regular. It has been over 100 for a lot of days. So being able just to keep your snacks at room temperature is really helpful, and a lightweight backpack that will hold a water bottle and some of the others. Pretty useful. So there it is. Once again, patriotcoolers.com, promo code Kyle, Kyle. Support a great company that's been kind of with us since the beginning, and they reached out and renewed with us, so we're really appreciative of their support. Also want to say thanks to my friends over at Catholic Vote. You guys can go to catholicvote.org. We're going to be talking about some stuff that was in the loop this morning, but you can sign up for the loop. They are a Catholic advocacy organization that believes in the faith, the fight for faith, family, and freedom. That does not require you to be a Roman Catholic by any means. In fact, a lot of this stuff has nothing to do with Catholicism at all. It has some pro-life articles. It has some articles about what's going on in the culture war, some things about that are just going on that are news. The today's loop is going to be talking about Trump being booked in Georgia, so we're going to talk about that for sure. It's got an FBI official testifying behind closed doors. We're actually talking about that today. Talking about the Maui fires. You're going to be interested in that. Trans predators in Wisconsin prisons. There's a whole bunch of stuff in these loop emails that I think you guys will find of value. So check those things out. And then lastly, and I think we've got a little bit of a pick here for it. I think we should be able to bring up, this is the Suspendables website. It's the-suspendables.com, and our friend GOB Actual, Garrett O'Boyle, slinging t-shirts. If you guys are looking for merch, we actually do have a couple. You can support the Suspendables and specifically support Garrett O'Boyle with this endeavor. We have the website, the-suspendables.com. If you leave the dash out, you're going to go to a hockey website, and that is not the same as what we are about. All that being said, let's launch into it here. Let me start bringing on some human beings that are my friends. How about this guy? You guys know him? There he is. That's the real Steve Friend. Hey, buddy.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. And would you know it? We have another interesting cat. Let me bring this guy on. Who's this guy? There he is. Are you slumped down? I'm going to have you turn your camera downward.
All right.
You could tell Garrett has moved into a new location. He's been able to, there it is. Look at this. He's got like
That's the only time I've ever been taller than Garrett in my life.
Yeah, and it won't happen again, unfortunately. You're doing a great job. All right, you all. So these are the Suspendables. We're going to talk about some articles. I'll put myself into a little small space here. We're going to bring up some articles to talk about. The first thing that's been going on this week, which I think, like I said, historic and insane, is the fact that our former president has been indicted yet a fourth time and then brought in to get mugshots done, because everybody is treated the same. There is no special justice other than the special justice of a guy who didn't go to Georgia and apparently committed RICO while doing a thing that is just a political action, talking about the standards and the issues that you might have with an election. I'm going to pull this sucker up. Let's just bear with me as we do this one. Kaboom. There it is. There you are, gentlemen. Trump booked into the Fulton County Jail after charges stemming from the 2020 election probe. Did you guys ever do any probes when you were working for the FBI? Did you ever initiate a probe?
I never did. You worked in New Mexico, so that's where the probing would go on for all those extraterrestrial investigations.
That is factual. That is correct. So they sent the bail for Trump at $200,000, right? We saw this pop up. This was yesterday. Big sort of to-do, and then it also resulted in Donald Trump returning to Twitter. Does the world change when Donald Trump gets back on Twitter?
Not for the 90+% of people who are unaware of what goes on that website. Or we can't call it Twitter anymore, right? It's X.
I can call it whatever I want. I'm an American.
I still call it Twitter.
That's right. Garrett, what do you think? Did you see his tweet, by the way?
I saw his truth post. I didn't see his tweet yet.
It was simply a mugshot, and I wonder, actually, I may be able to pull it up on another screen here, but it was his mugshot, and it just said "Never surrender."
I have a couple thoughts on this.
Send it.
But wait, can I just interject one thing?
Yes.
Him going to Georgia was him surrendering, was it not?
He was presenting himself to the courts. I don't know if that is a surrender. It doesn't mean that he's given up the fight. But yeah, in some ways, I mean, they did call it a surrender, right? That's what we would call that if somebody came in and turned themselves in.
I mean, I saw the mugshot and I thought perhaps I will render it down to a simpler image and put it on the back of a t-shirt.
It is a really, really aggressive mugshot as far as those go.
It is. I think I heard on Bongino, he said that Trump should not have paid the bail and he should have just sat there. And I like that take. I mean, that would get people riled up.
Just think about the crisis that would create for the Secret Service that would have to go through and just set up the prison for their
the county jail. Nice.
Right, in Fulton County, which I'm sure is really nice and has probably really nice facilities. The outside looks okay, as we're seeing on the screen right now. I'm going to read a little bit here from this article, and I'll let you guys continue on. It says the court set the bail at $200,000. He was quickly processed and released. Jail records stated that Trump stands 6 feet 3 inches and 215 pounds, and the record stated that his hair is either blonde or strawberry with blue eyes. There is the picture for those of you who are watching on our Rumble channel. That is a pretty irritated looking man. Pretty iconic in most ways too. Wearing a suit, power blue, red tie, with that little logo. So some people have gone out there and made a little meme creation option so you can actually create your own Fulton County Sheriff's Department booking photo if you like to stand in support with the president. And people have. But the other thing is, of course, 12 other people were involved, or 17 other people, I guess, were involved in this. And so you had people like Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell and Jenna Ellis and a bunch of others. Jenna Ellis was smiling in her photo. Do they generally recommend a smiling mugshot? Does that play well?
No, I think it sort of distorts the view if you ever need to locate you again. It's kind of like your passport photo.
It distorts the view.
But she's a happy warrior. Jenna Ellis is, she's obviously not going to get any support from Team Trump on this because she's now in the DeSantis camp.
Right.
But I heard her talking, and she makes a really good point. And I think the overarching problem here is she worked as a lawyer for a client, and the state of Georgia indicted her for being a counsel for a person who they don't like. So
yeah, truly sort of unprecedented options. The thing that's so crazy to me is that now people are digging into the tweets of this Fani Willis, this woman who is the DA, who obviously is a politician. That's how you get a DA job. You don't have to be a good lawyer. You just run for office and you get elected. And the interesting thing was she was also challenging the results of the 2020 election on November 3rd, November 4th, saying we need to protect the integrity of Georgia elections. So this stuff has been set up for a long time. I'm going to read Trump's quote. He just said, "This should never have happened. If you challenge an election, you should be able to challenge an election. I thought the election was a rigged election, a stolen election, and I should have every right to do that." And as you know, many people that you've been watching over the years have done the same thing, whether it's Hillary Clinton or Stacey Abrams, many others. I think he's right. This is a travesty in many ways, which is his actual words. He says that when you have great freedom to challenge, if you don't have the great freedom to challenge, then you're going to have dishonest elections. And that seems to be the case. This seems like a free speech, cut and dry scenario.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it goes back to what you were talking about a couple of days ago, the Kobayashi Maru. Their side is thinking outside the box. They're just throwing things at it and saying, well, let's find out what happens here. And our side continues to just play by the rules and saying, look, this old dusty document says that I have the First Amendment right and I can do this, that, and the other. And they're saying, well, I don't recognize the social compact that exists. We don't, that document isn't legitimate to us anymore. So it's an asymmetrical confrontation where one side is following a set of rules and the other side is making up the rules as it goes along. So I think there needs to be a turnabout as fair play here. Back to him, whether or not he surrendered himself or he presented himself, whatever you want to label it. Why did he go? Why didn't he just stay home in Mar-a-Lago and say, I'm refusing to surrender? He already has the governor saying that he's not going to participate in assisting another state with their political persecutions of him. So he's got the governor's support there, and he exists in a compound. I mean, I guess that would force the Fulton County authorities to get a UFAP through the FBI to come and arrest him at Mar-a-Lago, and then you would have a blue-on-blue situation. But I mean, we should see that play out. He should never have surrendered at all. He should have just refused to present himself. And now what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, I think there's some really strange things that could happen. He's playing a different ball game, so we'll see how it works out for him. I'm not feeling really good about it. Garrett, do you have any novel thoughts on that?
Probably nothing too novel, but I think Steve's point about the Kobayashi Maru, which I thought was a great episode and take by you, combined with the
I bring my friends on to just talk about how great I am. That's really nice of me.
You say you're not a nerd, but every time you talk about Star Trek and Star Wars. I want to see the action figures.
No action
I love
figures.
it. The movie quotes. Before too long, I'm going to be dropping Big Lebowski bombs the rest of the episode. But no, also with Saul Alinsky and that whole ordeal that we talked about, I don't know, a week or two ago. But they have a different handbook, and they don't care what the rules are. I mean, if that's not clear at this point, I don't know when it will be, because it's very clear to me. I mean, I've been saying probably since I became a cop, at least, that we are on a slippery slope, and I think we're in full free fall. You know, that slope has been iced, and we're sliding down it as fast as we can.
Did you just get out of the shower, Garrett?
I did. Yes.
I can see that on your shirt. That's nice. That's a good looking suspendable shirt. That's one of our merch people, right?
Oh yeah. This is
Guys,
one of the prototypes.
For sure. I will also tell you that regarding action figures, the only action figure interaction I had was when I was living in an apartment in Burbank when I was working at a movie studio at 27. My roommate moved in with a ton of action figures. He was like in his 30s, and he was like that guy. We had two 19-year-old college roommates. They had bunk beds, and they were living like dorm life in one room of the apartment. We had this guy who was in his 30s, and he was a creep, and I was in my mid-20s. And he had hundreds and hundreds of action figures, and they were like Transformers and Boba Fett and all the things. I don't know what they were. And he went out for like an extended weekend or something, and I moved them around the entire house. And I took all of his DVDs, which were alphabetically organized, and I put them in like every box of cereal. They filled in every single slot in the dishwasher. I put them in every single drawer of every single furniture piece in the entire house. I put one in every single cushion of every single part of the seats. It's like a classic roommate prank when you have too much time on your hands. I put them, like everywhere. I had the action figures like hanging from the little strings that come off your fan and your light. Like they were everywhere. It was insane. And he didn't much care for that. It was frowned upon to touch another man's action figures, but I thought should be frowned upon to have action figures at that age. That was just me.
I worked with a guy who was like that. He had them around his desk, and he was a big Marvel Universe guy, DC superheroes, Star Wars. He had all they're collectibles, right? They're not action figures. They're not toys.
That's correct.
But my kid would come in, and I would just take him over to his desk because my kid is a kid and likes watching those movies. So he would be excited to see them. And he would just ask me, he was like, Dad, how's your friend with all his toys? Does he have more toys? Because I want to go play with his toys.
Clearly. Yeah. I mean, kids understand that these are toys. It's like, don't touch them. Leave them in the box. They lose their value. You know what loses their value? Your self-worth has been degraded because
you're the comic book guy from The Simpsons. That's what they are as they grow up.
It's tough. I actually did have a friend in college who was like that. And I'm sure some of his stuff, if he sold his collection and was able to turn that into, I don't know, enough for him to live on for 2 years, that would have been worthwhile. But that's not what these guys do. They just hoard it. I don't want to get too far afield in that. Let me bring this article up here. This is from Daily Signal. This is Tyler O'Neill, who we've talked about before. He's gotten pretty deep in on what's going on with the FBI story. And what we're seeing here is that a judge this is like sort of you talk about playing outside the rules, talk about playing with a different set of rules. It's not indoctrination, says a federal judge. The federal judge is rejecting Maryland parents' plea to restore the opt-out for LGBTQ books and pride presentations. And so we have a U.S. District Court, so that's a federal judge, denying Maryland parents the request to allow their kids to opt out of instruction using pride storybooks. And you have a group of people that are atheists, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, and other parents demanding that they can opt out of this LGBTQ book curriculum for pre-K through 5th grade. This is not for high school kids who have to go and step into the world and know that this is out there. We need to make sure that these kids are indoctrinated, says this Maryland district judge. I'm going to read a couple little pieces and I'll let you guys respond. As parents, it says, although Maryland law requires schools to allow parents to opt out of sexuality instruction and provide notices for such lessons, new policies adopted in March exclude any opt-out rights for this. So that's good. And then the parents sued, requesting a preliminary injunction from the Montgomery County School District. Montgomery County, right outside of Washington, D.C. Garrett, you would have been nearby there if you had taken your new post. So a place I'm fairly familiar with and definitely a lefty kind of place. But, there's still conservatives living in every lefty blue area. If you live in Maryland, you're behind enemy lines, folks. You already know that. You're on the wrong side of the state lines, and you are dealing with tyranny. But this district judge rejected. Of course, it was a female district judge. I'm sure that's not related. The parents' motion on Thursday, and it says that the parents who are suing have not shown that the district's use of storybooks crosses a line from permissible influence to potentially impermissible indoctrination. And Garrett, I feel like you have strong feelings. Go.
I do. I do. Overall, in this country, I'm not against banning a book because banning books then turns to burning books. And I don't think that's ever okay in a society if they want to be free and if they want to critically think. However, when it comes to the teaching of our children, it is the number one, it is the parents' prerogative to determine what they should and should not read. When those children hit 18 and they go off to college or move out or whatever they do, go ahead and read whatever you want. But when we are sending them to government school, this is precisely indoctrination. This is what they want. It goes back to at least the 50s, if not earlier, when government school started becoming more and more part of the bureaucracy that we have. And look at it now. They have the strongest union, and they pretty much do whatever they want. And while you're going through that article, it reminded me, because I had heard of this numerous times in the last, decade, of how To Kill a Mockingbird keeps getting banned or trying to get banned. And I pulled up an article just from this past May, where in Biloxi, Mississippi, of all places, they're trying to ban it because it makes people uncomfortable. I imagine you guys read it in high school, if not earlier than that. Probably everybody in the chat and watching live or seeing this in the future has as well. I mean, it's a classic. It's a fantastic book. There is a ton to garner from there, and to say, and so it's getting banned. This book is getting banned. But now on the flip side, a judge is saying, no, LGBTQ plus and whatever other sexual related content, whatever other type of indoctrination they want to shove down our kids' throats while we send them to the government for a minimum of 8 hours a day for about 15 years of their life. That's not indoctrination. But yeah, go ahead and ban To Kill a Mockingbird because it makes people feel uncomfortable. I mean, the forked tongue nature of these type of decisions and rulings, it drives me insane.
Reasonably so. When we had Tiffany Justice on from Moms for Liberty, one of the things she said is we don't make book bannings part of our platform when it comes to public libraries, because the public can do whatever they want, and there's an expectation that there's parental supervision in those areas. However, if we're talking about school libraries where you are going to be entrusting your children, that's where the line is drawn. And that's where she sees the nature of this impact and where parents need to get out there and say, look, if we're not going to be chaperoning our kids at the school library, then we should curate a collection that's appropriate. Steve, you have any strong thoughts about this? I know you've been a parent or a parent at a school board meeting, in fact, and also one who was told to go watch parents. So I imagine you've got both sides there.
Yeah. I'm a domestic terrorist or a domestic violent extremist, I guess, from the FBI's perspective, or Carlton People's perspective.
We'll get there.
We'll get there. This just demonstrates that you cannot have a separation of church and state in a functional society. Clearly, this is a religion, and this is a necessary component of that. You have to educate your young about the tenets of your religion, and you have to make sacrifices in your religion. You have to cast your kids into the fires of Moloch to worship at the gods of LGBTQAI plus 2S #,
at all the above.
So I think that, again, Kobayashi Maru, I'm going to walk in and pull my kid out of that, or I'm not going to send my kid to school that day. And then we'll see when they come to the house and say, well, we're going to take your kid, and we'll see who rallies behind that. Or
change the scenario.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sending my kid to school. And if you say that he can't pass to the next grade, well, I guess you're going to have a glut of third graders, because, we might represent 10% or 15 or 20% of the voters or the conservatives in this area who get swamped in the election. But we're not an insignificant number of people. And how are you going to handle third grade next year when you have 20% of the kids being held back? And the next year, the additional 20%. So now you're at capacity and you've been overwhelmed by that. So we'll just use civil disobedience, or I'm sure that they would send child protective services to the house and say you're contributing to the delinquency of a minor because you're failing to educate them.
Right.
Now we have an armed standoff because you're not coming into my home to take my child away because I don't want them to be indoctrinated by your gay agenda.
It is a gay agenda. Lest we have an insane revolt in the live chat, folks, if you are watching and you are on Rumble, please scroll down and hit the like button. We are having a discussion that is happening on the sidebar, and a special thanks to Critter64 and to Eric Jason for encouraging that, folks. We do really appreciate the likes. It actually does. And somebody says dislike. I think that's the person that's dicking around with my mic volume there. So we do appreciate the hackers that want to get involved. If you don't have a hacker and a hater, then you're not really doing it right. Let's bring up another topic here that I think I want to continue onward. I don't want to spend too much time, but it is all these things are going to get to a single point. And I love that you guys are adopting the Kobayashi Maru sort of scenario, because there is something really interesting about when you are facing a lose-lose scenario. And we are in a lose-lose in so many ways right now. All the options lead to either violence or destabilization. None of them get to an outcome that's favorable and probably not preferable even for the lib types. So if that's the case, we have to change the rules of the scenario. That's why that's why we love Captain Kirk. The American way is it's not winnable. Let's see about that. Oh, there's too many people on the Nazi side. There's too many people that we're fighting in Japan. These are unwinnable wars. How about we create a new technology that no one's ever seen before and go drop it on a couple of cities and end lives in a way that is so shocking that nobody can play the game anymore? They changed the scenario. It's an American tactic in many ways, at least the way that America was kind of taught to me.
Yeah, we didn't stand out in front of the redcoats and just toe to toe because we knew we couldn't win that fight.
Despite the fact that we're dealing with, at the American Revolution, the strongest and greatest military that had ever been seen by the world at that point. And they were defeated by a bunch of people who just had strong ideas and new tactics. So the tactics are the things I'm talking about here. This is another piece from Daily Signal. This is from Mary Margaret Olahan, who is a wonderful lady who writes a bunch of pieces about Catholic interests, but I think this is just a general conservative interest right now. It says, how many imprisoned men who identify as transgender are guilty of sexual assault? More than half, new data shows. So you guys will be shocked to learn this, as men who have thrown cuffs on both in the local and federal way, that guys who don't want to go to real prison choose to identify as women, especially predators, and then they end up being housed in women's prisons where they can victimize other prisoners. Is there anything more disgusting than creating a captive victim population? I'll go to Garrett first on this one too.
No, absolutely not. I mean, this again is part of this anti-God agenda that we are seeing, that it's taken a foothold in our country. Everything has been flipped on its head. Even this. What are prisons for? They're to house the worst people in our society who commit the most atrocious crimes. I know that isn't always the case. That's a different rabbit hole to go down. Overall, generally speaking, that's what prisons are for. Even in the prison now, we are turning people who used to victimize normal citizens of society. We're now turning them into victims because of this myth that there are 72 different genders or however many they're up to these days. And that, a man who's in a male prison, he now claims that he's a woman. And we must, because it's the right thing to do. We must transfer him to the women's prison because he claims he's a woman. And then, lo and behold, big shock. Once they go to the women's prison, they start raping people. Is anybody surprised by this? I mean, this stuff that is so clear to anyone, like, you don't even have to be a Christian. You just have to have simple, what used to be Western morality. And you can see that the path we're on is one that leads only to destruction.
I'll tell you this, we seem to have attract some of Dan Bongino's McGroins. So welcome to any of the McGroins that join us. I see Knuckles McGroin in there. Our live chat has gotten kind of wild. Before you get a chance on this, Steve, I want to read the actual facts they said. Of the 161 biological men who are housed in the Wisconsin Department of Corrections, so this is your world, Garrett. This is down the road from you.
Yep.
Who have self-reported as transgender. So there's 161 biological males now claiming to be transgender. 81, which is 50.3%, have reportedly been convicted of at least one count of sexual assault or sexual abuse as of late July. These prisoners may have been convicted of additional offenses on top of that are not sexual offenses, but at least 50.3% of these people were sexual assault, sexual abuse, and shockingly, those people, these sex predators, are the ones that are identifying as transgender. 50%. Any thoughts on that one, Steve?
Yeah, I want to see how many were charged with sexual assault after becoming incarcerated. That would be an interesting stat to look at, but I don't think you'll find that. That won't be put out to the media here. I mean, look, when you commit a crime and you're convicted and sentenced in our society, you don't lose all your rights. You lose your freedom, but you still retain some rights, and one of those is protection against cruel and unusual punishment. And I think that the females in those prisons who are now being housed and forced to room with male predators have a pretty strong case to say that their rights are being violated. And for our counterparts on the left wing side of the political spectrum, who are always arguing for basically emptying the prisons and arguing for prisoners' rights and voters' rights restored and gun rights. Well, not guns. They don't like guns.
They don't like guns. I was going to say all the rights except guns.
All the rights
you can
except
vote,
guns.
But you can't own guns. Guns are
but,
bad.
But they are standing idly by because they've chosen a new victim that they think is better. And that is the person that says, I'm a boy who's now going to say that I'm a girl.
It's pretty straightforward. And the Eighth Amendment, right? That's our prohibition against cruel and unusual. I just pulled it up just for my own memory and refreshing. Excessive bail should not be required. $200,000 seems like a lot of money for President Trump coming in for a nonviolent anything with no actual convictions of anything. But no excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishment inflicted. What is more unusual and cruel than locking in a bunch of women with male sexual predators? And somebody mentioned in the chat too, like, what are the pregnancy rates that are going on in there? Isn't it amazing to imagine an increase in pregnancy rates in female inmates who are only exposed to other female inmates?
Yeah, it's like Jurassic Park, right?
That's right.
Nature finds a way.
I guess so. The nature finds a way because men will lie about it.
Yeah, I mean, Eighth Amendment considerations. How about the January 6th people? We're just going to house them in a gulag and to keep issuing superseding indictments to keep them behind bars for years on end and never let them actually have their day in court.
God forbid. Let's do this one too, because all these are going to they're all going to link up to one small thing. You guys are going to be amused. And Garrett, this will be a shock to you when we get it, but I sent Steve the article. This is another article that we're looking at here today. This is coming from Daily Wire and Zach Jewell. This is Maui fire survivors say the authorities blocked only paved roads out of Lahaina as the town burned. Survivors of the fire that swept through said the only paved road out was barricaded by authorities as the flames overcame the town. And the only way that people were able to escape was essentially they were disobeying the direct orders of the law enforcement that was involved in that. So this is one of those instances of somebody who is doing their job, I'm sure. And I'll let Steve go first on this one, but these are people that were following orders, I have to imagine, and they were blocking the exit route. You can see just the devastation. Anybody who hasn't been paying attention to this, it's not very difficult for you to go out there and find an awful lot of really, really awful footage and just see the destruction. And most of them show burned out husks of cars that are sitting on a roadway. So here we have a local police were shutting down the only paved road and the easy access to getting out of there.
Yeah, I think you have to. It's easy to assign malice here when obviously it's government and there's incompetences should always be your primary directive when you're assigning blame. I think to me, it's a tendency to not act, to freeze, and that fight or flight or freeze. People freeze when it comes time to make decisions in government because they are worried about accountability. You're not going to be held. Nobody ever gets fired for doing nothing. So your better option for your career longevity is I'm going to email my supervisor and find out what they want me to do. That way I can always pass the buck and there's a record of me asking my supervisor, and therefore I will evade all responsibility here. And I'm reminded of Chernobyl with that, where it was like completely, we're going to cut off these people here and we're going to try to avoid accountability. We're going to shift blame. We're going to say, oh, well, we had this nuclear meltdown, but what about 3 Mile Island over in America? It's really America's fault. And I'm waiting on that to sort of play out. And I guess we'll probably get that from the climate change or the global warming people will say something like that. And they won't talk about the fact that they had water available to stop it or an alert system. And they said, no, we're not going to use that because we have to be sensitive and not use water to combat fire.
Right, because that would offend the water gods or it would be doing something when nothing was easier. Garrett, you want to talk a little bit about when you're in the military and sort of the rulings, the teachings that they put in through basic training about unlawful orders and what those look like in the wake of what happened in Vietnam and some other places. Obviously, war crimes are all over the place.
Right, yeah, you are taught on one hand to obey orders no matter what. That's the point of your military indoc. But part of that, and it's a very important part, is that when you receive an immoral or unlawful order, you cannot follow it. So people might think, well, wait, militaries, they're just, lockstep, just obeying orders. Yeah, by and large, that's true. But in the American military, there's that one exception to following those orders when they are illegal and immoral. And in this case, I think of a half a dozen different situations just from the U.S. military. You had the My Lai massacre in Vietnam. You had the Black Hearts in Iraq, or Kill Squad in Afghanistan. I mean, there's countless ones that we can point to where it's bad leaders and then people doing what people do, just simply following orders because it's the path of least resistance. And this article, these government officials blocking the road, incompetence, I don't care what it is. It's evil. It's wrong. And it made me think while you were reading that. It said the only people who escaped and survived were the people who didn't follow the lawful order, essentially. Because if the government is blocking the road, you accept in our society that that's a lawful order. And it makes me think of Romans 13, one of the most abused passages of scripture over the past few years. And I think it's only going to continue to be. But part of it says, for rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval, for he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. Okay. When you are the government and your primary job is to preserve life and liberty, and you're blocking the road, you have flipped your God-ordained purpose on its head. You are no longer being a servant for good. You are being a servant for evil. And when that happens, I mean, I don't know what you do, because the government is standing there blocking the road so you burn to death. Like, that's
something you really have to accept, Steve. Maybe reflect on that in light of what happened at Uvalde, because that's what immediately occurred to me when I read this article.
Yeah, I mean, I would look back to that, and even the conversations I had after that with people within the FBI, where they were saying that, well, no, the police acted correctly there and should have stood by in the hallway idly as this guy just executed child after child after child when they listened and put Purell on their hands while they sat there and played on their cell phones. Mm-hmm. You just have to recognize what your duties and responsibilities are, and that's not following orders to come down from on high from whoever. It's recognizing what the situation is. And I've said since the beginning, since Uvalde happened, and there was, obviously the evil of the person that went in there and killed those kids. That aside, the worst person in that scenario was the officer that went over. There was one of the officers, his wife was a teacher.
Right.
And they took his gun away. I said, the officer who took his gun away is the worst person on earth. How do you go up to that guy and not say, I got your back. Let's go now.
It's roll time.
Yes, it's time you got to get in a gunfight today. Today's your day. And
so, and both of you guys have my 100% support. If there's a moment where that happens, where it's like, it's two of us, there's 10 people and they have your family hostage, we're going. And I'll leave this as a thought, because my buddy who was my neighbor in Virginia, who is a hyper masculine former MMA fighter, just like a power lifter, freakish. He's my size and he lifts like 6 times what I do. And I always really appreciated his take on it. He said, if you are saving up your life to die for some reason, what in the world are you saving it for, other than to go into a hail of bullets to go save children? Is there anything that you could do better with your life than that, to lay down your life for people who will never know you, for children who haven't had a chance to live yet? I mean, that's literally why people join the military and why people jump on grenades and why people go into doors. That is the mindset. It's like, we're going in to save life. The people who, the heroic guys who were on the hostage rescue team, we had it may be a small example of it, but there was a guy that jumped in through the bunker in Alabama and just threw his body down on a kid and basically said, I'm going to take fire and someone's going to have to come do it. And I think he ended up almost severing a hand or a thumb, going through razor wire and all this kind of stuff. This is the kind of heroism we expect of law enforcement. And there are small examples of it. And so they are not without examples in this country. And yet, if you're not willing to throw your body into the breach to stop something like children, or if you're not willing to tell your commander or whoever your authority is, your supervisor in a law enforcement entity, hey, you know what? I'm not going to lock down this road. There's a freaking fire coming through and these people need to get out. In fact, I'm going to run down the line and get people moving more quickly.
Yeah.
Like, clear the roads that way because I'm sending everybody in. they're getting out of this. That's the only thing
value. It's a recognition of value. You're
right.
basically saying that my job is more valuable than those lives. But my job to take this guy's gun away is more valuable than his ability and my ability to go in there and try to save his wife and save those children.
That's right. And we talked about this yesterday with Jacob, honestly. I mean, if you think about it, this was actually some of the topics that was brought up. It's like, if you say that people who will do small things wrong, and he talked about how an agent lied to him when he said, listen, I don't care whether you're going to arrest me or not, just tell me so I can say bye to my mom and, make sure my dog is going to be fed. And then he sits down and they said, no, we're not going to arrest you. And the first thing they do is read him his rights. The dishonesty that takes place in that very, very small space. And we've all been in that scenario where you've had somebody surrender in and you have the choice. You could be honest with them or not. And there may be reasons why you're not going to be honest with somebody. But if somebody's already agreeing to it, like, so what if Jacob Chansley decided to go for a run and escape? Like the U.S. Marshals would run him down. That's what they do. And I've always felt like it was no big deal. It's like, if you want to run, you're going to run. I'm not going to stop you. And you're going to run anyway. So why would I try to con you into here as a ruse? I'd rather just tell you honestly, because then we have an easy expectation. And in the case of this, we have people doing things in small matters, and they can't be trusted in the great matters, which is yet another biblical passage, I'm sure, that is resounding in your head right over there, Garrett. It's like the servant who can't be trusted in small matters cannot be trusted in great matters. And law enforcement is systematically sort of eliminating their ability to be trusted in things like this. This probably was a decent human being. I'm sure that this will haunt this guy forever.
It better. It ought to. Right. Because how can you look yourself in the mirror after that and say, can you honestly look yourself in the mirror and proudly say, I was doing my duty? No. And if you are, you're lying to yourself.
That's the only way you justify it, but it's not righteous. It's not righteous.
Absolutely not.
I don't want to dwell on this too long because we're going to get somewhere with this, and I'm going to get you guys there. So here we go. This is an interesting article that came from realclearreligion.org. It just said attacks on institutions, Catholic institutions, should concern all of us. So those of you who are not Catholic, and you see that I preach a lot about going to check out Catholic Vote, it's because Catholic Vote's priorities are a representation of the larger Christian apparatus in America. And so what they're showing here, there's a 42-year-old man who broke into Our Lady of the Rosary Catholic Church in Manhattan, vandalized a large crucifix. I'm sure it was very, very valuable when it comes to material worth, but also the symbolic attack on there is not nothing. It's the third attack against a Catholic church site in New York alone since June. That's relevant. And there's also nationwide examples that are within the last couple of days, including in El Paso, which is a very Catholic area, as many of you may know, because it's full of people who came in from Mexico and has a lot of cross-border sympathies, which is a very Catholic area. There's something really wrong about this, is what he says. This guy says, I'm Jewish. I'm not Catholic. This is really the key for me. But I'm raising my voice now on behalf of those under attack, as I did years ago. If you are willing to tolerate attacks on any faith, then there's a very strong possibility that they will be coming for you at some point. And the fact that this is not going on right now is going to pivot me. I don't want to dig deeply into this. We're going to talk real quickly about someone from the FBI, and this is going to get somewhere in just a second. So bear with us, folks. We're going to sew this all up. This is a quick little article from the Jacksonville.com. This is the Jacksonville news source. The Florida Times Union over there. Steve, this is your stomping grounds. Sure and it was a discussion about the color of law, understanding the FBI's role in excessive use of force investigations. And it was featuring a guest named Carlton Peoples. Why do we know the name Carlton Peoples?
Carlton Peoples, currently the special agent in charge of the Birmingham field office of the FBI, was formerly the acting deputy assistant director of the criminal investigative division of the FBI. He is the one who issued the guidance to label parents at school board meetings with the threat tag of EDU threats.
Did you say the criminal division or the counterterrorism division?
I thought it was criminal.
So he was at counterterrorism. He was CTD. And so Carlton Peoples was the assistant director over there. Interestingly enough for folks, that means he was the guy that generated the EDU officials threat, which means he was the one who directed the FBI agents to do investigations into parents at school boards. Here he is right there. You see him on the screen. This is a Birmingham Times where he is now currently posted. You said this was a strong puff piece. Do you want to talk about highlights from it? And I'll kind of scroll through it for him.
Yeah, he just kind of goes into his background of getting into the FBI and coming from, as a black man in America and in the communities there that have this tremendous distrust for law enforcement, and that complicates things. But I kind of was able to make it through the whole article without vomiting and got to the end. And I always look for the timeline for these careerists, and he's just no different than anybody else.
6 years of investigative?
6 years investigative experience and immediately elevated up the chain of command. So you have somebody now who's ascended into the upper echelons of senior executive service who has the bare minimum experience as an FBI agent, but he's going to be supervising and leading effectively large swaths of special agents in the FBI.
Let me read this real quick, too. This is by Ryan Michaels, so we'll give him credit. Says, this is Carlton Peoples' direct quote. He says, the FBI was probably perceived by my parents and my grandparents more as an enemy than as a friend. But of course, today it's something different. It's about helping people. It's about giving back. I think you can ask anybody in law enforcement. You don't do it to get rich. For the most part, I think those in law enforcement are about giving back to the community, helping people, and wanting to be a part of something positive. I wish you could get more of a puff piece. Do you want to know something funny about Carlton Peoples that I did not know when I exposed that document?
Go for it.
I had no idea he was a black diversity hire who had the limited amount of... I never even occurred to me to even think about what the guy was. And yet he spent his time in the Civil Rights Division. I always find it really interesting that they always put they put black guys in charge of the Civil Rights Division. As though somebody else couldn't do it. You know, I will tell you there's very few people who would be more offended by abuse of the police doing investigations under color of law, which is to say representing authorities they don't have, than guys like you and me, right?
Yeah.
Like the suspendables are like despise this sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it's always a black guy that's in charge of it. I don't know do they despise it more? Are they better investigators? I don't know. But it's always interesting because every single person I've seen in charge as special agents in charge that ran these civil rights divisions, they're always black guys. And I just don't know why that is the case.
You know, it's what's funny about that is early on, like even in the hiring process for the FBI, one of the main driving factors for me was to work public corruption cases primarily into violations of color of law.
Me too.
And I'm a white guy.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like that shouldn't matter at all. My last line shirt with the blue line flag. I'm sure a lot of people who might see that might think, oh yeah, back the blue. Yeah, I do back the blue when they do the job the correct way, when they uphold their constitutional oath the correct way, when they use their authority to violate law under the color of that law. That is one of the most atrocious things when it comes to being a quote unquote public servant. So it shouldn't matter what color you are, but yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's kind of like a form, I was almost going to say reverse racism, but that's a misnomer. It's straight up racist against...
It's just racism.
Yeah, it's racist against white people. It's racist against everybody, even the black people, because, oh, well, he's black, so let's put him in charge of the Civil Rights Division. And then a lot of these people, like Carlton Peoples, they just march along with it because why not? Why not? I mean, I'm just climbing the ladder and I'm going to use the pigmentation of my skin, which I had no control over. God just created me as this type of person. I'm going to use that to just keep climbing on up. I mean, it's just disgusting.
And if he's not concerned with getting rich and his driving force in his career is civil rights, I want to know, did he turn down his senior executive service bonus when they hit their IPM quota metrics on domestic terrorism because he opened up a certain number of J6 cases?
More importantly, did he decide that he was going to step down and be a case agent and do investigations since he obviously missed out on some of that opportunities? I mean, you figure that guy has the same amount of investigating experience as any one of us, maybe less than some of you guys who had local police time, but certainly it's the same amount that I had. Like, I would have been qualified to go on and do management, apparently, based on their time. I spent my 6 years in the field office as well. And to me, that would be appalling if that was the only experience I had to go out there and try to lead the organization. I would have been embarrassed for myself because there's no way that makes any sense. Let's keep moving on talking. We're going to continue to badmouth, and we're getting towards the end here, but let's badmouth a little further what happened in Richmond. This is a article coming from the Washington Examiner. Many of you may not have known this happened yesterday. The FBI Richmond official who oversaw the memo targeting Catholics out of the Richmond field office was testifying in front of Congress. This is an article by Ashley Oliver. I'm just going to read some of it for you here. The FBI official responsible for overseeing the controversial document that this yours truly exposed with the help of a whistleblower inside the FBI appeared before the House Judiciary Committee on Thursday to testify about the matter. Stanley, I don't know who this is. Stanley Meador? I don't know Stanley, actually. Special agent in charge of Richmond's field office. So this is the SAC that's over there. Spoke to the committee for several hours behind closed doors, just the way that you guys have. according to 2 sources familiar with the interviews. So somebody's leaking this already. I'm sure it'll be 100% defense of everything. We did the right thing in the right way. I can't imagine they did anything else. It says the document, which was issued internally within the FBI's Richmond field office in January and leaked to the media. I wonder if they actually credit us here. What do you think? Do they credit us? Let's click.
Doubtful.
There it is. John Levy. Does it have any? Are we going to credit uncoverdc.com and the Kyle Seraphin work here? What do you think? I'm scrolling through it just to see. No.
I won't hold my breath.
Look at that hair, man. It's just so perfect.
I just want to shave his head. Nope, no Kyle Seraphin credited there. That's okay. The work was done. It wasn't about credit. It was about getting it out there. Anyhow, this guy was named in the letter that the FBI wrote to the committee on the 28th, saying he was one of the officials involved. Also included the person who retracted it, and he met with Catholic leaders in the area. You guys have any sense about what goes on when you get an Intel product like that approved and how it works?
That would have gone up through a significant number of chains of people, including a supervising intelligence analyst like our friend George Hill. Probably would have seen the desk of at least an ASAC, Assistant Special Agent in Charge. That would have been pushed over into ODNI, which is another problem that I see here, where Christopher Wray still insists that it was scrubbed from the servers of the FBI. Well, what about ODNI? It's still there. So
the other question is this: can you actually, if this was a violation of First Amendment rights and therefore a violation under color of law, are they allowed to scrub evidence from what was going on inside the FBI systems? When they said that they were getting rid of it, I was always like, oh, really? You're getting rid of the thing that showed that you've done something wrong because it's wrong?
Is that obstruction of official proceeding?
Sounds like it.
Is somebody going to get a Sarbanes-Oxley violation there? Are we going to see the Intel analysts held to account for the things that they are putting out into the world? It's an interesting question. And what that leads to is our final here. This is the wrap up, folks. And this is something I found very interesting. This is from a website that I'd never seen before called thecatholicthing.org, written by Randall Smith. And the entire article is on the formal and material cooperation with evil. I'm going to read a little bit of it because I think it's really interesting. Discussion, he basically leads off by saying he had a discussion with somebody, and this is where it came out. There's a classic case, much discussed and much disagreed upon, that involves a servant who is told to carry a ladder to a house which his master intends to use to climb up a window so he can commit adultery with the mistress of the house. So the scenario is servant has to carry ladder. Ladder is going to be used to facilitate abortion. Is this material support? Is this formal support? And so on. So the question is, everybody agreed, at least in the past, that adultery was a sin and it was evil. It was something we shouldn't do. So the question to the degree of culpability of the servant's cooperation with evil, that's the question that we are trying to do. Is it formal? Is it material? And disagreements are always rife with a bunch of people as they consider the actual details, which are going to be discussed here. And I'm going to kind of throw it out to you guys. So did the servant know what his master intended? I want you to put yourself not in the question of the person carrying a ladder to go do adultery, but let's think about the police officer who says, I'm not going to let my friend go in and save his wife, or the police officer who says, you can't drive through this road because I'm told that you can't come out even though there's a fire coming. Did the servant know what his master intended to do? Did he know and concur with the plan? Did he know, but he was resistant? Was he resistant and trying to convince the master otherwise? Was he resistant but said nothing? Did he know his master's plan? Did he not know it, but should he have known it? Especially as they approached the house, or in this case, as they approached a road where there was fire burning. Should he have questioned at that point whether his master intended some evil? Was his ignorance culpable or non-culpable? Could we say that his intention was simply to aid the master and avoid punishment and not to help the man commit adultery, or in this case, facilitate the burning alive of people in their cars? And the question is, should he have been able to foresee the result even if he didn't intend it, in which case would he be innocent of guilt or would he still be guilty of it? There's all of these sort of questions, and this article is fascinating. I think you guys should give it some time. You can actually find it. It's just called On Formal and Material Cooperation with Evil from thecatholicthing.org. Let's talk about this in sort of a more formal way. Garrett, I'd be really curious about your thoughts on formal versus material support of evil.
Yeah, it's really an interesting topic. When you texted me this morning, I was like, I don't think I've ever heard of that. So I briefly looked into it as much as I could, and it's a very interesting rabbit hole to go down. And in the case of this servant, or in the greater realm of a government servant, or really just anybody for that matter, if you know the intentions, I think the answer is clear, and you're basically falling back onto the superior order's defense, which we know is it's a failed moral foothold that you're going to take if you're going to do that. If
Superior
you don't
orders for people, that's the I'm just following orders, even if the orders really were illegal.
Right. Now, if you don't know the intent of your master, now it's time to use your brain and rely on your training, your experience, and say, is this order that they're giving me, could it potentially lead to actually being a violation of my morals, of my position, of the law? And I think most people that I have worked with in government, whether it be military, police, or FBI, I would say the vast majority of them are smart enough and have lived enough of a life to know what the potential outcome might be. And then to get those wheels turning and think, am I actually going to violate my oath by following this order? And I don't know, maybe people like us, because we're so few in number, actually contemplate and think about these things more than others. Like I used to think that was normal, that everybody thought that way, but apparently that's not the case.
Yeah. I want to give Steve a chance to respond to that as well. Thoughts on that? I gave you a chance to read the article beforehand.
Yeah. I mean, I had two experiences that I think were kind of relevant to that. One was the Whitmer case, where I didn't know that we were kind of coming in with these guys who had been entrapped until after the fact. So as much as I feel bad for what happened there, I don't think that I'm personally accountable for what I did there, because I was just ignorant to that information. But I did take from that a lesson that I needed to make myself more aware of things going forward when that came to pass. So, I don't feel necessarily the remorse from that standpoint, but, take that to the January 6th objections that I had. And I said, look, I one, shame on you, twice shame on me. I think that I'm contributing here. And they tried to minimize it. And they said, look, you're only driving the subject to the magistrate. That's all you're doing. It's just you're an Uber, your transport.
And yet you're still part of the overall operation.
Correct. I mean, you can get into the weeds and get, the IM pencil, do you blame the guy who was working at a plant that manufactures rubber that is then put into a tire that's put on the car? There's way too much interaction in a global economy to blame everybody for everything. But I think if you can draw a direct correlation, direct line, you have to take a stand on that.
The idea that you would learn from your experience, and you had 8 years of local law enforcement, is that correct? Before going into the FBI, or is it the
5
other way around?
local and
5 local,
and
then
9 FBI.
So you figure that even in that time, 15 years in or 14 plus years in, as you're going through, you're still learning these things. We'll just have a little bit of moment of levity, because you said, fool me once. It brought up the famous George W. Bush quote for me. I had to go look it up to get it right. He said, it's in Texas, probably in Tennessee too. They say, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me, well, you can't get fooled again. Right?
Inartful.
That's right. But you should not be fooled again once you've seen it. You had an opportunity to see something. You looked at it and you said, the thing that was presented to me is not the same thing that I experienced. There was a fundamental disconnect between the orders given and the operation that was conducted. And when that happens, it is my responsibility as an agent to look into myself, as an agent of the government of any level, state, local, federal. This is incumbent upon all people, military as well. You may be ordered to do something that you do and don't have full awareness. And that's the culpability of if the man shows up to the house and doesn't understand what it is, and he puts the ladder up, and then he realizes as he goes back up, as the guy comes back down, that he's been committing adultery. The next time the master orders him to move that ladder, he's now complicit in it because he has an awareness and an understanding. So he has no excuse to not know what is happening. And I have to believe there's a possibility that the guy standing at that road had never considered the possibility that he was shutting down the way out. I imagine it'll haunt him for the rest of his life. But the other possibility is that this is not the first time someone has asked him to do something that was either illegal, immoral, or unethical without his awareness, and his questioning should have been much higher. And that's what we really need to expect. They always tell you that it's not the problem with law enforcement per se. It's the people that's always in it. It's no policy or procedure that will save us. The Durham report said the same. It's people that has to adhere to their oath, and they have to actually have the moral character to do the job that they're requested to do. And I think it's really a big deal. Either of you guys have closing thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a huge deal. I mean, and two, like, don't get me wrong. Like, the thing I'm most concerned about rectifying is my own character flaws, my own sin nature. I'm not saying I do it perfect every time, but you damn well need to do your best and build off. Every experience we have in life should be a building block. And so I think that's why by the time I started whistleblowing, it was so abundantly clear that some of the things that were going off the rails, where it was like, I can't willfully continue because this is evil, this is wrong, and therefore it's causing me to sin. And maybe in the past, I was the guy putting the ladder up and I didn't know, but in the future, I did know, because it's incumbent on us, and I think especially in law enforcement or even other sectors of government, to know. We must, because we are supposed to be, like I said earlier, Romans 13, we are supposed to be servants of God for your good, for the people's good.
Right.
And if we stand in the way of that, then the whole thing is flipped on its head. And then we're not, if we're not servants of God for good, who are we serving?
True. Steve, final thoughts on that, and we'll read out here.
Yeah, I think you just have to be, the people in law enforcement have to be the type of person that really realizes the ramifications of what you do on a day-to-day basis. You might be saving a baby from a snake, or you might be chasing a bad guy down a flight of stairs somewhere. But no matter what you do, you have impact on people that is long. It way outlives your career, and because of that fact, you always have to take that into account. I still think back to people who I either arrested or didn't arrest, and the impact that had. And that sort of mentality should be the norm in law enforcement, and it shouldn't just be just follow orders and go do what I tell you to do.
Totally true. The thing that I mentioned, I had Alpha in my show with him last night, and one of the things, it's like the day that interactions happen with law enforcement is everyday interactions for people who do law enforcement, and it is probably some of the most consequential experiences and memories for the people that are not in it. That moment that you interact, that choice that you make, like you said, it has very long-reaching implications for them, even if it's just your day-to-day operations. And taking that responsibility seriously is something I know you guys did. Something I always felt like you're representing a much bigger force that you will never know how it will play out. Where you never know what that kindness or that sternness may do when it echoes down into history for that person as they instruct their children, as they go forward and tell that story somewhere else, as somebody else decides to be fair or unfair with law enforcement in front of them because of their previous experience with you. So really important, really impactful stuff, and unfortunately maybe not thought about nearly as much. But if you're in law enforcement, if you're in the military, if you have those positions of government authority, you really need to reflect on where you're at right now. Gents, give them your handles, let them know where they can follow you, and we will wrap this show up. And I really do appreciate both of you guys jumping in with me.
At Real Steve Friend on Twitter, at Real_Steve Friend on Truth Social, and I got a conference call.
All right, jump on. Thanks, Steve. Garrett.
At GOB Actual, anywhere pretty much. Truth, Twitter, Instagram.
Yeah. Thanks for jumping on this morning. I'm glad that your hair is dried. Looks like your shirt is dried too, buddy. You guys have a good weekend. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you have been listening to the Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live from Liberty Hill, Texas on this Friday, August the 25th. And for those of you who are paying attention in the live chat, yes, my wife's water did break overnight, and we are waiting on baby maybe today. So expect a recorded show with Mickey Willis on Monday. That's my expectation for you. I do really appreciate all of you. I want to say thanks for all of you for watching, all of you who have hit the like button and that are in the live chat there. It's been great, and I've been watching it and catching a piece of it. I really appreciate the conversation you guys are adding to what we are doing right here. You can leave us a 5-star review in the show notes. You'll notice there is a link directly to Apple, and you can leave one just like Sandy Sue 10M did on the 18th. Says, "You give me hope. I love your show. I'm so thankful that you and Steve Friend are out there and brave enough to stand up. Your interviews remind me of family dinners with pastors, lawyers, judges, business owners, and Democrats and Republicans, all discussing politics, religion, and life. I'd sit at the table and watch the vigorous discussion. Now I'm 70 plus, and I listen to your podcast as I clean, drinking in all the discourse. I miss people not being able to debate at holiday dinners. We would not be making the mistakes in the voting booth." I tend to agree with you, Sandy. Thank you. That's a profound thought. The ability for us to communicate with each other is so important, and having these conversations. I mentioned earlier before we got started, the reasons why I'm willing to let people say anything they want on this podcast. It's their story. It's not mine. And I trust that you guys will make your own decisions about it. I don't have to interject myself in. And that's why I really liked hearing what Jacob Chansley had to say yesterday. It's his story. It's not mine. So I don't have any say in it. And honestly, I have no bearing on it. I just was facilitating you understanding it the way that I can, clawing it out. So thanks so much for listening to our show. We're missing Ryan Matta today, but you can always follow him at Ryan Matta Media, MATTA on Twitter, and at Ryan Matta on True Social. Folks, thanks so much for joining us. Make sure you do hit that like button, and you can always join us, rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin for our live shows. They are at 9:30 Eastern Time, 8:30 here in Texas, America. And please consider subscribing wherever you get your podcasts. Let me see if we can actually set this audio up, because I have been still fighting that little goofy. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you guys after the weekend.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.